All right, so welcome, Eddie. Thank you so much for coming on the Art of Listening podcast. I'm very grateful for the time that you took out of this day to come to have an interview. I spoke with you a few years ago on Instagram, and I'm very grateful that you're here again. You're a yoga teacher, you're an author, researcher, and overall a very inspiring person. So if you would like to give yourself a short introduction so people get to know you.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. I can't believe it was a few years ago when we spoke. That's crazy. Um, my name's Eddie. I'm from New York City. I run a yoga school here, and I also run a Hindu temple. I do have a science degree focused on research for yoga. Mainly human physiology is what I'm interested in. Nervous system is largely what I look at, as well as emotional states and things like that. And I guess I do a variety of things. I am currently teaching a system of yoga that let's not call it a system, but maybe an approach or a methodology that I've been developing over the past few years that focuses in on deep listening to the body, expanding your states of awareness while in postures, and taking into account brain, body, and body-brain signaling, and how the different postures are going to exert an influence on that communication between the brain and the body through the autonomic nervous system largely. And one of the reasons for this investigation that I embarked on is because looking into the yogic texts, it seems to me that the idea is you need your nervous system to be in very calm and resilient states in order to easily enter into states of meditation. And in fact, Swami Hariharananda, who wrote an amazing commentary on Yoga Sutra, defined that samadhi, or these deep states of absorptive awareness, was the acme or the pinnacle of calmness of the mind, where the mind is completely placid and undisturbed by anything occurring outside of you, which of course affects what happens inside of you. And so this idea of the acme of calmness really went deep inside of me when I was reading his commentaries, and I thought about this a lot. And I thought about how we could then use asanas and pranayama and all these external limbs, quote unquote external limbs, to help find these deeper levels of calmness within us. And we can't find calmness just through mental states. We need to find them through nervous system states, because the nervous system largely is going to be influencing what's happening in our thinking pattern and our reactivity patterns and our emotional patterns and everything, because the nervous system is going to stimulate endocrine glands to release. It's going to stimulate how the immune system is functioning. It's going to stimulate whether we are in a receptive way of interacting with people in the world or an aggressive type of a way. So this nervous system regulation, I really think, is key. Regulation might not be the word for it, because the nervous system more or less regulates itself if we allow it to. So let's just say the attentiveness to the signaling of the nervous system is a better way of putting it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel also nowadays you see so much about the nervous system regulation. And recently one teacher, she said or shared something very inspiring, that she said even the nervous system is meant to react. It's not that you just are in a constant state of regulation or in a constant state of calm, and yet that you find a balance in the nervous system, in your body, in your mind, that it regulates itself again. And what you've been just sharing, I think nowadays, looking or more in the Western world, that yoga is used mainly for the physical practice, even though it's much beyond that. And even for myself, the physical practice was my first entry point. But I did observe over time, even just after 1 month, a whole shift inside of myself, and that also opened up, different layers of myself. So how would you say, if people are mainly or even are scared to come to yoga because they feel like they might not be physical able to do that. That's oftentimes also what I hear, oh, I'm not flexible, I can't come. So how would you invite people in to actually move beyond the focus on the physical practice?
Well, honestly, I mean, I don't really know. I think that people come to do yoga if they're drawn to it and if they want to. And if they're not interested in it, there's not a whole lot I think you can say that can really convince them otherwise. So I don't really try to convince or proselytize or try to sell yoga to anybody. I think that if you want to do it, you're gonna come do it,
Yeah.
and that's all. And I think that also just from a sort of foundational point of view, if people notice something about you where they feel like you look calm or you look healthy or you look happy or you look like you're glowing or there's a light around you or whatever, they might say to you, hey, wow, what are you doing? You know, I'd like to learn that thing, etc.
Yeah.
So I think that we as teachers and as students, we need to be practicing these things and embodying them, see what kind of changes they bring to us. And then those changes will, come forward in our lives as how we are. And then that is really the only advertisement which is needed for yoga, so that we become good people
Yeah.
and that we
Yeah.
become thoughtful people. And that we know that the things which are good for us might not necessarily be good for everyone. So we don't push stuff on people. I have friends who do like CrossFit or whatever, like, and they're like, oh man, you have to come to CrossFit. It's the greatest thing in the world. I have like not a whole lot of interest in doing it. So no matter how much they say to me it's great and it's changed their life and they love the community or whatever, I don't feel pulled. I feel pulled somewhere else. And so that's the thing I'll do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. It's true. Just by the state of being that you inspire, and that's actually already enough. Um, Shortly touching on your own personal practice. I know you practice yoga since so many years. How did you observe the own evolution of your practice, and how has your practice changed from the time when you started over now that you're moving? I wouldn't say moving into a different direction, but yeah, how did your practice changed over the years?
Yeah, I really like this question because when I started doing yoga, I was doing it completely as a spiritual practice. And I didn't start doing yoga postures when I first started doing yoga. I was doing meditation and I was becoming a vegetarian and learning how to cook and reading some books and stuff like that. And it was all about enlightenment, spiritual growth. And that was why you did yoga. You did yoga for liberation. And there wasn't any other reason. There was no sort of physical component to what I was doing. And then I started doing some yoga asanas a little later and was trying to figure out how these physical practices had anything to do with like raising your kundalini or, enlightenment. I didn't really see a connection, but I thought that the people who were teaching the classes probably knew more than I did. So I just kept going. And then after a few years, maybe 4 or 5 years, I was exposed to Ashtanga yoga in India and started doing that. And then I did that for a few decades. And when I started doing that, I started drifting away from yoga as a spiritual practice and got really lost in yoga as a physical undertaking. And I spent about 20 years or so in this physical realm. And I really lost touch a bit with who I was as a person who was looking for growth and expansion and spiritual understanding when I had started. And so when I left the Ashtanga yoga world and started doing what I'm doing now, this was a returning to myself. And it was a returning to who I was when I was 18 and 19 and I had started on this path. So really, I feel a great sense of coming back to myself now. And that's what it was. And so I got, I say that I got sidetracked for a couple of decades, and other people push back and say, oh, no, it was part of your journey or whatever. And okay, fine, if that's what they want to think. But for me, I got sidetracked
Mm-hmm.
by physical attainments, and I'm very happy to be back where I am now. I have no problem with doing things for your physical body. Like I like going to the gym. I do cardio stuff. I like kettlebells. I use free weights. I do all this kind of stuff. But I understand why I'm doing it, and I understand as well what the use of asanas and pranayama and meditation are for me as well. That they're not really physical. You use your physical body, but you only use your physical body as a reference point for expanded awareness. And that's not really why I, lift weights. I lift weights and do push-ups and calisthenics for the maintenance of this vehicle, which is a vehicle for awareness. And yes, you can be super aware when you're lifting weights and all that, but it's different because of, there's a different kind of pressure being put on the musculoskeletal system from weights and from calisthenics. Then there is the pressure which is exerted from holding yourself still in an asana, for example. It's a very different orientation. They're both wonderful, but they're not the same.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Not everything needs to be the same. And if everything was the same, something I say a lot, there would be no reason for creation. The world would not need to exist if everything was the same. The world exists because diversity is wonderful and diversity is amazing. We should try different things and do different things and learn different things. Otherwise, what's the use of the world at that point?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And I feel also then once you come into, let's say, asana practice, even holding a pose, the difficulty often is not, or most of the time, the physical, but it's actually the mind to hold yourself, or the focus of the mind in a pose. And that's sometimes when I observe all the different flows or yoga practice that you see nowadays, like power yoga. And I always like to think about, or for myself, reflect on the word power, because what does it mean? Power just in the body, or can a powerful practice, what does it mean to actually have that steadiness and focus of the mind, which becomes the harder practice than only working with a physical body.
The word Shakti is often translated as power. Shakti really isn't power. Shakti is the goddess, and she is the substratum of all creation and the energy behind creation. In certain traditions, you'll see the Icha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, and Jnana Shakti, which is the Shakti of desire to manifest, to become. The Shakti of Kriya, which is action, the ability to accomplish and put things into motion, and Jnana Shakti, the Shakti of knowing, of being. In order to know, you have to be present. So this idea of knowing, the Jnana Shakti, that it's not like knowledge of things. We can all have knowledge of things, but it's the knowing principle behind everything. And the knowing principle is presence. And so these are three of the Shaktis. There are many of them, but these are three that are inherent in all people and in all manifestation. And so this is sort of the true power. It's the power of presence. And it's not power in terms of control over another person, or even necessarily control over your own mind or your own self. Mainly because this idea of control creates almost like this instantaneous association with resistance. That there's this thing happening that I don't like, that I'm not comfortable with, or I wish wasn't there. And so I'm going to control it. I'm going to stop it. I don't think this is the sense that the early yoga or spiritual texts were talking. I think that in later translations of some of the Hatha yoga texts, you see some more forceful type of language. But the idea, even within Patanjali's yoga, which is an old text going back to about 350 Common Era, the word niruddha, which is often translated as stopping or stilling or controlling, is describes a state of mind, niruddha state, where there's no movement, because there's no need for movement, because everything has been stilled and stimulus is not causing things to shift. The process of doing that is called nirodha. And nirodha is an active process, which is going to be different things. It can mean slowing. It can mean stilling. It can mean the selective focus on one thing rather than another. Or it can mean the act of something stopping because the momentum behind it is no longer there. Like if a car gradually rolls to a stop because the gas has been turned off, or a fan stops spinning because there's no electricity going to it. This is how something naturally comes to a stop. But you can't force something to necessarily come to a stop, except for temporarily. But for it actually to fully stop, then the energy below it or behind it, which is driving it, needs to become calm, needs to stop, needs to become thin, needs to just dissipate and melt away. And then there won't be any more movement. So it's not a forceful thing. And yes, it requires a little bit of effort and patience and time and practice, but it doesn't have the same sense of control, and it doesn't have the same sense of power in a Western sense. But the power is energy. That's what the power is. The power is energy.
Yeah.
So now there are different approaches to yoga. They're doing asanas, that is, and some of them are going to be more forceful. But for those, you really have to be following the lifestyle suggestions. Like you have to be living in a secluded place, like untouched by, you can't be doing intensive, long kumbhakas and pranayamas and then doing online shopping after or going out partying. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
It has to be a real, disciplined lifestyle, away from everything, limited food, vegetarian, no interactions, et cetera, et cetera. So people in modern lives in big cities and stuff, we're not doing that. That's not the approach. And if you try to do the very intense approaches and you're not living an extremely disciplined and quote unquote pure lifestyle, these things, not only will they not work, but they can also cause psychological disturbance, which I see a lot of. So these things are left to the real yogis who are off somewhere. And then for the rest of us, we have to do practices that are suitable for living in modern society, in cities and places like that. There are people who can do it, but you're not going to do that in New York City.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel most of us, right, do live that modern lifestyle or also in big cities, and yet yoga can be of great benefit. But how do you guide people on that path, even of yoga and the things that you share, but let's say on that quote unquote modern lifestyle, so that yoga is still of great use and benefit of what you've mentioned before, the nervous system regulation, and how can people, approach it in the best supportive way?
Yeah, I mean, all of these things are accessible to everyone. I was talking about the intensive practices, and sometimes people try intensive practices in the wrong situations or in the wrong places. Intensive practices can work, but they have to be done in the right context, in the right place, with the right preparation. Otherwise, they're problematic. And the yoga texts, they say that as well. But everything else, like everything I do and everything that I teach, this is all meant for people who use computers and have telephones and, have a job maybe, or families, and have to earn an income. That's everything I'm teaching is for people like us. And the main thing is that you can know yourself no matter where you are on the planet, what you're doing in your life, what your job is, what your stresses are, what the pressures are, et cetera, everything. No matter who you are, if you have a desire to know who you are, then you can know. You just need to pay a little attention to that desire to know. And you don't know all at once, and you might be a lot of different people. You might be different people at different times of your lives, but you still have to know all those different people. But the principle of knowing them is the same. That part of you doesn't change. The awareness, the knowingness. But the other things, they're allowed to change. But the knowingness doesn't change. And that's what we want to form a relationship with and get in contact with.
Yeah.
That's why I practice yoga. So, and when I teach yoga, this is the idea that I have inside of myself, even if I'm not saying it out loud, that I know what it's for. And I think that it's important to know what it's for when you teach something or when you do something. You know, you can think back, like if you had a grandmother or a grandfather or someone who loved to cook, and, you know, when they were making some bread or a cake or whatever it was, and they were putting tons of love into the thing that they were making, then you can taste that love in the cake or the bread or in the pasta or whatever it might be. You don't need them to tell you, oh, I made this with so much love for you. Here it is. You know, it's going to
Yeah.
taste better because there's a lot of love in it. Like, you know, you can feel it. And so I think the same is true for teaching stuff. Like if you know, and if you do it with a lot of love and a lot of care, then people will feel that. And then you don't need to tell them all the time why they're doing it, because the way that you teach it and the thing you're teaching should lead them to have that kind of an effect. You know, you don't give someone again, like a particular meal, and by saying to them, oh, this is going to help your digestion, that it helps their digestion. It's going to help their digestion if actually they can digest it and it's good for them. And so then you don't need to go into all the details. So that's kind of how I feel. I don't like to talk a lot in the classes about what something should be doing or that I hope that it will be doing or anything like that. I teach the things that I know for myself bring me into those states. And then I share those things with people. And I see whether or not they bring other people into those states. And if they do, excellent. And if they don't, something else will.
Yeah. And also with that, I feel the experience of each pose or each practice is so individual to each person. Whatever they sense and resonate, depending on where they're at in their life or whatever is activated within them through a practice.
Yeah, it's very, very, very personal, which is why we're all people.
Yeah. I do have your book here, The One Simple Thing, which I'm actually inspired to read again after our talk. Something that I'm reflecting as well, it's coming back to the simplicity of the practice, maybe the physical one, maybe just a meditation, because there's already so much noise outside that I find that bringing the noise even back into the yoga or the practice itself. I know there are a lot of people that listen to this call who are yoga teachers. Are there any advices that you would give to yoga teachers to keep the simplicity and also the essence of the practice?
I don't know if I have any advice, but I do think it's a good idea to keep things as simple and normal as possible. I think we shouldn't think that we're doing anything special. We're doing something exceedingly normal. And that normal thing is trying to be in touch with who we are and to be present in our bodies, be present with our emotions, present in our mind. And that's like a basic thing that people should be doing. And there's nothing special about it. But we get distracted from that because of life and stress and ambition and, you know, what society dictates to us, etc. So I think that's the main thing. Be as normal and simple as possible with all of these things. And and share things freely.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think I'm a particularly good yoga teacher. I don't even know if I'm a good yoga teacher. I don't know if I'm a bad yoga teacher. I don't even know. But I like what I do. And I like sharing stuff, and I like practicing things, and I love learning things. And I question myself a lot, and I often doubt myself if what I'm doing is actually good or beneficial. I like to get feedback from people a lot about how
Mm-hmm.
things are working for them. So this is sort of how I am on one level, not on all levels, but on one level. And um, I think that having that part of me, which isn't super confident, like all the time about what I'm doing, is a good way to make sure that I, keep learning stuff, and I'm open to input and open to feedback and things like that. I mean, no doubt there are certain things that I think I'm right about. There are certain things that I think I know, and maybe if those might be scientific things, or there might be things that are observational things about the yoga world. So there are things that I definitely have opinions on, and things that I'm definitely critical about. So all that stuff is there within me. But there's this other side also, which has unsurety, and I kind of like being unsure of myself for certain
Mm-hmm.
things, because that, as I said before, gives me a little bit of keeps me really present with what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and my first teacher always reminded me to keep the beginner's mind, to be open and to learn from everyone around you, may it be your students, but also your day-to-day life. And I do know that you teach pranayama, but you also do a training in pranayama, and you have a breathing app, which I will link below, that people can easily access. And it's a good reminder of bringing daily presence or moments of presence and reminders into your day-to-day life. I know pranayama is a vast topic as well, but what are simple pranayama or breathing exercise that people can include in their daily life to be essentially reminded and being pulled back into the present moment?
Yeah. So one of the things that um, is so good about breathing, aside from the fact that it keeps us alive, is that it is a function of our autonomic nervous system. And our autonomic nervous system controls a lot of our survival functions. Our survival functions are all the things that keep us alive: our heartbeat, our blood pressure, body temperature, sleep, etc. And when we get stressed out, or when we have anxiety or a lot of fear, one of the things that happens is our survival functions react to the thing that we're feeling, because the survival functions want to keep us alive. And so if the survival functions sense a threat to our survival in the form of stress or anxiety or fear or danger, it's going to start releasing particular hormones, neurotransmitters, and other substances that are going to help keep us alive. And that's all part of what's called the stress response. And the stress response is a mechanism which has allowed us to evolve and survive as a species for a very long time. So it's a positive thing. But also, if it's too much of it, then it becomes a negative thing. And when there's just a little bit too much of it, we start to get into this habit of the body of thinking that the stress response is normal for things that aren't really life-threatening, like having one or two bills that need to be paid that just like gives us high blood pressure, like, someone hasn't answered our text right away, and we start to go into a panic about what they might be thinking or why they haven't answered. So these are all like abnormal stress responses that start to happen when we have chronic stress in other areas of our life. So slow breathing helps to calm down, generally speaking, the autonomic nervous system all across the board. And it's the only autonomic function that we have that we can very quickly exert a measure of control over. So if you asked me right now to take a very slow, long breath, I could do that. But if you asked me right now to fall asleep on the spot, I wouldn't be able to do that. It might take me a little while to fall asleep. And sleep, of course, is autonomic nervous system. If you asked me to instantly digest my food that I had just eaten in the same way as I could instantly take a slow breath, I wouldn't be able to do that. Digestive process is a little slower, or change my body temperature. So I can't change and automatically shift all those other autonomic functions, but I can automatically and quickly shift my breath. And so when I do that, it also engages different parts of the brain that are related to attention and to strategy and to decision making. And so at the same time you take a slow breath, you also improve your decision making capabilities in that moment as well. So it helps to bring a lot of different things online all at once. So basically, any slow breathing will be good. Inhale for 4 seconds, exhale for 6, out your nose or out the mouth. Either one is okay. All different types of things can be really helpful for the stress response. If you need energy, there are different types of breathing practices that can be done. If you need focus states, there are different things that can be done, because breathing is going to affect how brain signaling occurs. And this is just a physiological fact. So there are all kinds of different things that can be done. It all depends on your needs. And the breathing app that you mentioned, this is mainly slow breathing practices for calm, for sleep, for dealing with anxiety, and also for helping to lower inflammation levels in your body. It's quite good for that too. And inflammation is associated with a lot of things, everything from back pain to diabetes.
Yeah, the breath, a powerful tool that's actually always accessible and free. It's interesting even to observe yourself throughout the day, whenever to see when your breath starts to flatten out on conversations. Even while we talk, just the reminder that you said slow breathing, even bringing that back into a being reminded for myself and starting that small breathing, it's interesting to observe the simple shifts within.
Yeah, it comes really quickly.
Yeah. Well, I know you have limited time, but thank you for this conversation. If people are now curious to connect with you, I know you're coming to Berlin, so I'm very excited to practice with you. How can people connect with you in the online space, in the physical space?
Well, thank you for asking. I do have a website. It's eddiestern.com. And when I'm in New York, I teach 3 days a week on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I used to teach every day, but now I have a bunch of other things I'm trying to get done in my life too, so I've reduced my teaching schedule. But all of those classes are online. And in Europe, they'll be in the afternoon, usually around somewhere between 2:30 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. CET. In New York, it's 8:30 a.m. or 9:30 a.m., except for Saturdays, 11. I do teacher trainings online that also have an in-person component, and that's on my website, yogaeducationcollege.com. And I use Instagram, and I don't post a whole lot on there, but I do use it. There's not much to learn there. And otherwise, I travel and I teach workshops a lot in Europe and other places. I'll be in London in April, and then I'll be in Berlin also. Berlin is 13, 14, 15, and London is 10, 11, and 12 of April. And then I'll be in Prague in middle of May. I think it's the 14th, 15th, and 16th, which is a weekend. And then I'm in Italy as well in June, and also Helsinki. And then I'm back in England in July. And then in September, I'm in Lugano and Torino and Warsaw, and then back in Berlin in October, and a few other places as well, and then India too. So, and then next year, I'm going to Wiesbaden and also Cologne and also Bern. So, and maybe I might be adding in a couple of other places in that region of the world as well.
Yeah.
So
Good news to have you a lot in Europe.
yeah, I'll
It's
be lots.
closer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
be a lot in Europe over the next year. Where do you live?
In Berlin,
Oh, of
very
course.
close to the studio where you will come.
Okay, cool. Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'll see you.
Yes.
Amazing.
And to just close it off, do you have any last message for people that maybe just embark the path of yoga or even are on the path of yoga for many years? Maybe it's one reminder of something that comes to your mind.
Um, Keep finding things that inspire you. And if you notice that something isn't useful for your evolution anymore, you don't have to keep doing it. Sometimes we hold on to things for longer than we need to because someone else is telling us that it's good for us or that we're going to get some benefit from it. And that might not always be true. The hardest thing that I did was it took me a long time to leave behind the Ashtanga yoga practices I was doing because they weren't helping me anymore. So for a lot of people, they help them for long, long periods of time, but they hadn't been helping me in my growth for a long time. But I held on to them because the the dogma of the Ashtanga yoga world organization was, take practice, all is coming, or, if if you have pain, it's because you're not breathing right, or all these kinds of things. And I was trying to believe those things and make them be true. But for me, they weren't true. And I knew they weren't. But I kept doing it anyway for way too long. So if I was to share something from my own life that I wish that I had been more attentive to, the thing that I wish I had been more attentive to was the signals I was receiving that I wasn't listening to, and that I wish that I could have acted on those sooner. And so now what I try to do is listen better to the signals that my body and my inner spirit are sending me, and try to listen to them and then try to act in accordance with them. That's all.
Thank,
You're
thank
welcome.
you. That's a good reminder. And that's also my intention with the podcast, to create a space to listen more, not just to yourself, but also to each other. So thank you so much, Eddie.
You're-
I will link everything below so people know how to connect with you. And thank you for your time.
And I'll see you in Berlin. Bye.